So up next, told you we're going to talk panel. So that'll be a nice little change of pace. I'm excited. We get to welcome back and what I consider now an old friend, as well as a new friend. So if you're with us at the start of the day, you'll remember our friend Vitaly, who shared about those really frustrating design problems and patterns that we're all much more than familiar with. And he will also be joined by Jim Kalbach, who we'll also get to hear from tomorrow. So I'll give you a little preview. He's going to be giving us a session on mapping experiences from those initial insights all the way to taking action. So it'll be a really, really great session. You won't want to miss that. You'll hear more about him. I'll give you his background tomorrow, but a little primer on him. He's a very noted author, speaker, and instructor in design, customer experience, and strategy. He's currently operating as the chief evangelist at Mural, and I'm sure a lot of people are very familiar with Mural after all of this pandemic remoteness. It's a great, fantastic leading online whiteboarding solution. I know I use it all the time. So I'm grateful to you and Mural, Jim. So thank you both for joining and rejoining us here. So what are we going to talk about? We are going to talk about how we can operate and function as designers in a post-pandemic world. So we're not talking about your typical like, oh, how has COVID affected you? We all know we've been working remote. We're tired of it. We want to move on. So let's kind of start to envision what that could look like. So I'm going to pose a couple questions here. We only have a short amount of time, so I'm hoping I'll get through a couple of them. Please feel free to pop any additional questions in the chat. I can, look over there and see if we've got anything brewing there as well. But up first, let's see here. Kind of between both of you, how do you think things will have permanently changed when we finally come out of all of this, hopefully soon. We've changed a lot over the course of this, but things aren't going to be the same. There's going to be a lot more people working remotely. Lots of new technology has emerged that I'm sure we'll continue to use. But what do you see happening there?
Should I take it, Jim, first? Yeah. So hello, everyone, and thanks, by the way, Katie, for bringing us back. I think it's a very interesting conversation because when I see people struggling with it at the moment is many of us want to not go back to what it used to be, like in all the offices and being stuck and doing all the, the traveling every single day, the commuting and all of that. But at the same time, nobody really wants to stay all the time at home. It seems like there really needs to be this kind of overlap. And what I see also that companies very often try to really figure out, so how much overlap do we need? Do we need like one overlap, like 1 day overlap over 2 weeks, or one overlap every week, or 2 days, 3 days? I think that every company is going to decide on its own. What's obviously very, very clear that remote is not going to go away. And it also has become very obvious that many businesses do not want remote to go away either, because it's just very cost efficient, right? The question then is, and this I think is the really core of it, how can we communicate reliably and well in this world where we do not see each other anymore? And this was kind of like a big challenge, which brought us wonderful tools like Mural and others, and Zoom and so on and so forth, where we kind of tried to figure out how are we going to communicate. That's, I think, the most critical part. But it's definitely going to be this remote / I don't think that any company can succeed in 2022 if it goes, on-site only approach.
Yeah, I mean, 2020, I think, brought changes to even what work means to people. And the flexibility that Vitaly was talking about will not go away. So we're not going back. Going back to the office is not going back to the ways that we previously worked. And I think we also learned a lot too. And I think that's part of the shift, is the fact that we kind of all figured out, both employees and companies as well too, figured out like, oh yeah, this can actually work. And I think people, particularly employees, got a taste of that flexibility and what it means for their lifestyles. So people talk about the future of work. It's really the future of lifestyle. And, there's all kinds of articles and cases out there with Apple and, people at Apple kind of bucking the system there. And I think that taste of flexibility is not something that's going to go away. So to your question though, Katie, what's going to happen in the future is I think we have to take all of what we learned during the pandemic in terms of how to survive in a very, very remote and then condition, and then add that to a mix, as Vitaly was talking about. It might be once a meeting 3 days a week, 1 day a week. It might even be just once a month, right? But we're going to have to be having this kind of work from anywhere mentality. WFA, they call it, right? And the office is just another A. It's just another A in the work from anywhere, right? So I think, we're going to bring all of these skills together, but we're not going to rely, I think we're not just going to rely on chance. And by that, I mean the water cooler conversations. There's this idea that if we're not, skateboarding around our campus, bumping into people randomly, we're not going to be creative anymore. And that's not how it worked anyway, right? So you take the office away, then you have to think about how are we going to stay not only productive, more importantly, creative, right? How are we going to stay creative? And I think we figured that out too, to some degree.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I also find that it's kind of interesting because I remember vividly, because it's a Muse conference which happens in Budapest. I remember vividly, I was living in Budapest for 2 years, and I remember every single coffee shop. This was my environment where I was working, right, for a very long period of time. And guess what? I'm kind of moving outside of the city now. Like I don't even know what happens to me now. And I think that just when we're looking at offices that are going to be spread out, and maybe just they will be more like, I guess, coffee shop places where people meet and mingle and think and discuss, and it's kind of more a social component to it, because I find it very difficult to be not talking to people in person in general. And so I think I do need a little bit of overlap with real human beings, not just broken pixels. I mean, I do like broken pixels, don't get me wrong, but I do like kind of 4K quality live in person too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, okay. So that kind of segues really nice into my next question. So based on, kind of what you've seen, and as well as the people that you've, worked with, do you feel like the whole COVID remote thing, do you feel like that's had a larger or a smaller impact on design teams versus other types of teams, especially given that, there's so much of design that is in that cross collaboration, like, working together kind of element, the water cooler talk. But also we have a unique set of skills that, we've adapted. We can use a lot of tools online that make our work together easier. So what are your thoughts there?
I've always believed that was kind of the holy grail of distributed collaboration, was, can you get a creative design team functioning well remotely, even well before the pandemic, like 10 years ago when I started working in remote software. That was kind of the holy grail. I mean, you could, on the other side of the coin, you can think of like a salesperson doing their job remotely. It's pretty easy to imagine a salesperson doing their job remotely, right? It's really hard to get an innovation or a design team. But again, I think we kind of learned how to survive, right? And our tools have shaped things, but we've also shaped our tools, and there's a lot of behavior, and we have a lot to learn still, by the way. So I think the pandemic has set us on a new course of flexibility so that Vitaly can go out, live in the countryside, and still be happy. But we still have to learn a lot on how to collaborate creatively. But I think we figured out enough that we can survive, right? And we can learn together over the next couple of years. The big keyword for me is intentionality. Collaboration in a remote or hybrid mode post-pandemic needs to be a lot more intentional. And we need to kind of think about it. And even what I'm calling planned spontaneity. People say, what about those spontaneous watercolors? Well, just plan them. I mean, it sounds like an oxymoron, right? But you can plan these team building moments in. You can plan these little personal moments in. You can also plan creativity as well too. I mean, essentially what design thinking is. And using our remote collaboration tools to be intentional about how we collaborate. I think that's the way forward.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, because one thing that we all learned, I think, is that we are actually extremely flexible and adapting to anything, whatever comes our way. I mean, especially in our industry, we're really, really happy and privileged to be in this industry, and I think we can adapt to whatever. I mean, if somebody tells us go to a remote island where you have very limited 2G connection, we'll find a way.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know if it's going to be working well in terms of collaborative design environment, right? But in the end, we will find a way. And so I think it's really interesting for me to see that even those things that were kind of usually considered to be a very, desktop workspace kind of base, and you think about usability testing, it was something I need to see how people react and this kind of things. We moved to remote usability testing. When you look into things like, we need to sketch, and then we need to figure out on the whiteboard how it's going to be. Well, we moved to, again, tools like Mural, where we have a collaborative workspace. And it's actually nice because it's just a link away. You can send it to developers, get some feedback. You don't even need to walk. You don't get disturbed while you're working because nobody is passing by and just annoys you. The only issue that I think is happening is all of this requires one significant shift. And there are people I know, designers, developers, all kind of creative people, they found it extremely difficult to work at home because they do not have the proper accommodation at home that would be, for working. If you have a small child that, requires attention, there is no way to do any meaningful work. And so that requires some sort of different setting. You might need a separate workroom. You need to accommodate for that. That's a separate conversation. But these people struggle a lot. And I saw a lot of people who had incredible difficulties adopting, right? But then you still kind of try to find some sort of a system at home to make it work. And so I think that this showed that we can. And so, frankly, I'd also, very much like Jim, I do not believe in this water cooler situation that we needed. Although I did see a couple of companies setting up a permanently running Zoom call where people can jump in, and there might be other people from other teams or so, and so they jump in and they just have a conversation while drinking coffee. That was working for some companies, but I mean, everybody's just finding their way, I guess.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Agree with that. And we do have to understand that for some people, working from home is not a good condition. And that's why things like backyard shed sales have gone up. People are building backyard because they're adapting to that. And I think the office is another option. So I'm not saying we don't need any office. And I think that it's still good to have an office there. You're just not going to have this dominance of the office being, the headquarters, and we're more important because we're here and you're there, right? So this kind of here and everybody's there. It doesn't matter, even if you're in the office, that's just another there in the here and the there equation. And I think we need to get more comfortable with that. I've been working in remote collaboration now for over a decade. And I think we only know like 5% of what we still have to learn together. Like there's still a big, long learning curve. But for me, the pandemic there was this kind of like liberating effect of, because we had to figure it out, and we kind of did. Mm-hmm. And yes, there are cons, but there are also a lot of pros, right? And I think you just touched on one, Vitaly, too, like the ability to include other perspectives. Now I have a design or a comps or flows or whatever I'm trying to get feedback on from my offshore team in India. And I can do that a lot easier because it's more fluid. It's not on printouts nailed to a wall in an office. I can actually get more input on my work quicker. Right. So let's embrace. So I guess my point is, other than, aside from being intentional, is let's embrace the positive aspects and amplify those and make our work better through the benefits of distributed collaboration.
Yeah, just to add to that very briefly, I think that there's also this notion that's really important. I think we often think about seeing online as a replacement, a temporary replacement for offline, and the other way around. But I mean, what we realized, because we're doing workshops and conferences online as well, it's different, but it needs to be designed from scratch. You can't just apply something that is as is in offline world and taking it to the online world. It kind of needs adaptation. You need to really design the experience from scratch. But I absolutely fell in love with online workshops. You will never, this is incredible. The things you can do. I don't know, Jim, but when I see this moving, pointers, Mural or all this is so cool.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you do that offline? In the same way, we had these experiences where we've been running online workshops, and we had this lecture style thirst, and then this person would go to a run in a forest while listening to the lecture, then come back, take a shower, sit down, and work with a group of people from Indonesia, South America, and so on some exercises in group. How incredible is that? You cannot do that offline.
I think we are witnessing the biggest change in what work means in our lifetime. And again, it's not the future of work or the future of the office. It's the future of lifestyle. Because what you just talked about for me is a human impact that can be a very liberating aspect, right? To be able to go walk in the woods while you're listening to a lecture, right? That's a change in my lifestyle now, right? And there's a lot of benefits there. There's a lot of benefits there that I think we need to embrace. Yeah.
Yeah, Katie, pardon me, my interruption.
And then I interrupted on top of the interruption.
That's what I'm here for. No, all I want is some good conversation. This is great. No, I love that that way of saying it too, like this change in lifestyle. I am, have always immediately thought of, that work-life balance. Everybody had to reevaluate that because, you on the one hand flexibility, but then on the other hand it was really easy. Everyone knew, well, I know that you're at home doing nothing, so you can answer my emails at 10 o'clock at night and things like that. So there were kind of these forces pushing in both directions, so it's really forced everybody to sit back and reevaluate some of that. Very interesting. All right, let's check our time here. Time maybe for two more, I think. So up next, I don't know how directly either of you work with your actual clients. Maybe it's indirectly through, kind of working with project managers and salespeople that work, kind of more directly with them. But what, how has that changed, kind of how you and your company gain and work with those clients to kind of help, maintain some of that, more personal experience? Jim, I think you were the one that mentioned, it's kind of easy to picture how sales could work remotely, but, if you still want to maintain some of that almost in-person kind of love, what have you seen there?
Yeah. I mean, I think that fits into a bigger topic that, I've been looking at. I did a webinar with our friends over at User Testing on the topic of staying customer centric. How do you stay customer centric in this world as well, too? Because some of the things that we used to do were, print out personas and put them up on the wall, right? So there was this armament that we had around us about being customer centric or visiting a customer. And I am customer facing, by the way. I have been at Mural for a long time, and I used to love to go visit customers and meet them face to face. I think it's really important, particularly the first time or the first couple of times. Then your online interactions after that are much better if you meet in face to face once, at least once. But for the past 18 months, I haven't seen many customers. There's maybe one exception, face to face, right? So how do we do that? Again, I hate to say it, but intentionality. And I love your point too, Vitaly, about not just taking the offline world and recreating it like online. Like, let's rethink what a customer. Okay, so I wanted to go visit my customer in their office and have lunch with them, right? Okay, I need to blow out all of the goals that I had in that and reconfigure that for how can I get to that same outcome, but do it in a digital way, right? And let's rethink that whole interaction. And it can be done. And you can actually maintain those relationships, and the team can stay customer centric. In fact, to Vitaly's point about remote usability testing and remote research, you can actually touch more people in your company now, right? Because if you do a Zoom call as your usability test, anybody can dial in and listen, right? And that kind of thing. So again, let's amplify the benefits of working digitally.
Yeah. So from my perspective, very quickly here, I think that's one interesting thing that I realize people really struggling at this point is when it comes to design systems, because once you have this absolute necessity to be really good in collaboration and this, it's not like the transition, but like handoff, be it very small, or be it like overlappy or whatever, you really need to be very, very clear. What is it? How is it going to work? And you need to really talk to developers and designers, like really, really be very, very clear about how it's going to move forward to make it all work. And so this is where I see a lot of companies really struggling, because communication was always, alignment, I would say, rather, like a perfect alignment has always been the cornerstone of making a great design system. And now, if you don't have proper communication channels in place and proper communication, clarity, kind of loss of ambiguity, then you will end up in problems. So in the end, I think it's all just about really being aligned in terms of tooling, in terms of techniques, strategies you're using, in terms of how you actually stay user-centric, as Jim just said. So I think all of those things are really coming together through the lens of collaboration. I think that's the most important part.
I would even say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Vitaly, that a design system is now more imperative, because that becomes then the thing that you can align around, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's it's kind of makes it obvious how we work. This is how we work. This is what we do. This is what we don't do. And then it's almost like a different level of documentation, which design system is anyway.
Absolutely. It reminds me of something you had mentioned this morning, Vitaly, about, questioning why, like, why are we doing things the way we are now? And is there, any way that we can do them different? Let's talk about how a design system can become more, core to us to be able to help facilitate those kinds of things than it was in the past. So we're right at time, but I have a really quick last question here. I'm curious if you could broadcast a tweet to yourself before the pandemic. So we're talking early 2020, maybe 2019, back when there was bliss, if you remember that. What would you tell pre-COVID you? Aside
I
from
know
like,
exactly what I would say.
I'll let you go first.
Yeah.
I would tell to myself, be very, very careful about what kind of internet connection you're getting into. I was not used to this, and I realized that I'm here now in Germany. Oh my, it has been a journey. I mean, the first couple of months, I was really devastated because I couldn't have, things like this would be totally unreliable and all of that. And I wasn't even used to that because I'm in a coffee shop and I know my coffee shops but I cannot do this in a coffee shop. This would be a little bit unprofessional maybe. So I did not spend enough time researching my internet connection, getting up in all kind of long contracts. Wasn't good. So now I know.
The software too, like the software has advanced so much by necessity. So it's been great to see that.
Yeah.
What about you, Jim?
I'm at Mural for 6.5 years. And prior to that, I worked for Citrix, the makers of GoToMeeting. So I've literally been working in remote collaboration software for over a decade, looking at, often as a designer, like at Citrix in a design team, looking at this problem and trying to evangelize it. Now that's actually part of my job title, evangelizing that. So for me, 2020 was almost liberating because it was like all of the stuff that I was preaching from my soapbox kind of came together. And what I would tell myself is, get ready. What you've been talking about for 9 years has gone from a vitamin to a painkiller. Because it wasn't just something to make you stronger. Now it was like central, right? So all of those things. So I would have warned myself that all of my preaching and evangelizing is now suddenly relevant to hundreds of millions of people around the world. And to be ready, well, my phone was ringing off the hook. Let's just put it that way.
I was going to say, that's
I would have warned myself.
We'll see you back